Welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors workshop series on distribution of goods and services in China. Are you marketing to Chinese consumers? Do you need tips on how to market to the Chinese? Have you registered your brand name? Have you protected your products and services? Are you looking to set up an efficient distribution structure? Are you looking to buy and sell goods in China but are not sure how to do this? Well, Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is offering this series of complimentary webinars and workshops on this subject. Our aim is by the end of the 4 days, so by the end of Thursday, basically, we are hoping that we will have provided you with enough information and tools to help you to start off your business in China or continue your business in China in a more effective and efficient way. Today, you've joined us for part 2 of this webinar series, which is on creating your Chinese marketing business model. Basically, if you're not ready to commit to the Chinese market, but you know there is interest for your product and or services, and you just want to, get started in an easy, non-committal, minimum capital investment way, then this is really the workshop series for you. So this session is going to provide you the legal ins and outs of marketing your product and services, as well as the tools you will need in order to be able to market yourself. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer, I am not a marketing professional. I don't have a marketing firm in China, but what I do help clients with is set up these marketing tools that they may need in order to build up their business and their brand in China. Now, this webinar is really geared to a variety of people. So I would love it, after explaining the varieties that should be on here, to just let me know who you are in reality. So these webinars are usually for newbies. So what I call a newbie to China are those people that are looking for or have already found an opportunity for their business in China and are just looking to gain education and learn how to protect their brand and their business in China and to create a structure that would be effective for them. The next category would be the startups in China. So those people that have already established their business but are in that period of 1 to 3 years of establishment. They've been so focused on the core business that they've kind of let a lot of the administrative and compliance functions go on the wayside, and now they've seen problems or obstacles arise, and they're just they're just here to learn more about how they can put that control back. And then I have the experienced China hands, which is always where people go, oh, why do you have people that are on here that have been doing business in China for 15, 20, 25 years? Well, the reason is because very simply, the laws and regulations change. So as an example, the new foreign investment law just came into fruition and implementation on January 1st, and everybody is trying to understand and learn about the new updates and gain new and fresh ideas in order to make their businesses efficient and compliant. So these are the type of people that I have generally on my webinars. Again, please be interactive with me. Let me know who you are. Now, how these webinars work, I teach or I educate, and sometimes I will ask you questions. Again, to make this webinar session valuable for you, interact with me. As mentioned previously, nobody sees your questions, nobody sees your comments except myself. So don't be shy, add them into the questions section of the control panel. Generally speaking, it gets a bit dull when you're just doing a presentation. It's always fun when there are questions that arise and people can learn from other people's experiences or understand that people are going through the same situations. So again, please be interactive with me. Now, what are we covering today? There's a lot of things that we're covering today. Basically, we're going to be looking at how effective it is in developing a marketing strategy from home versus in China. And then we're going to be looking at the tools that you might need in order to be able to just simply market yourself in China. So we'll be looking at WeChat, about having a Chinese domain name, where your website should be hosted. Those are usually the key items that people want to learn because those are the main tools that people use to just basically start marketing their brands and their companies. We're going to then look a little bit about some licensing issues that you'll have to be aware of. And I'm going to touch on at the end a little bit about e-commerce, although we'll be looking Thursday in depth at e-commerce. I will be touching a little bit here today on e-commerce platforms, how they function, and I'm adding it in here today because, again, I'm looking at a marketing strategy from home versus in China. And not everyone is aware that you can also do e-commerce from home versus in China as well. So I wanted to add that in because it might be a nice flow for people to understand that. Obviously, if you're more focused on B2B business, then that might not be something that interests you. Why am I able to help you? Well, my name is Christina Kohler-Kalucha. I'm head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been in Shanghai since the end of 2003, so I'm hitting almost 16 years. My focus has been for 16 years on inbound investment to China. I've only been working in the corporate services sector, so my real expertise is on the Chinese market and how foreign investors go into that market. I have worked with over 500 companies, international companies looking to enter China, expand within China, and then grow within the Asian region as well. And something I will touch on at the end is I'm also recently a creator of the China Roadmap program, which gives you a little bit of an idea of what a company's journey should be in the Chinese market and what are the things that a company should actually focus on. Now, if you enjoy these webinars, you may also then enjoy getting our weekly e-newsletter, which goes out every Monday and will start going out from next Monday onwards. We had a bit of a break over the New Year period. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn or follow the company on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. We have a channel which has all of our older editions of our webinar series. So you can also log in there. Everything is free of charge, but it just gives you updated information. So let's get cracking on today's presentation. Now, this is probably going to overwhelm you. So what I wanted to start off today, and I got this from Kantar, which is a PR and marketing company. This is for 2019, the China social media landscape. It is very difficult to read all the writing in there, but it gives you an idea of all the different digital channels that exist in relation to promoting your brand, promoting your company, or even just promoting yourself, and also where you can additionally obtain information. This also gives you an idea of where the Chinese population is hanging out. Okay, where are they going for e-commerce? Where are they going for online gaming? Where are they going for knowledge and information? Where are they going for entertainment? This kind of highlights for you how expansive it is and how potentially different it is from the Western world, where our focus is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Google, and all of these other varieties of websites and apps that exist. This gives you an idea of what people are utilizing in China. Again, it's really hard to read, and I apologize for that. But you can also go into Google, research China social media landscape, and you will find a lot of these marketing and PR companies that have these type of wheels highlighting all of this variety and all of this information. So I wanted to start off, not to overwhelm you, but to kind of give you an overview of this type of landscape, okay? So when marketing to China, the biggest question that I get is generally how effective is it to develop a marketing strategy from my home jurisdiction, whether that's in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in Europe, wherever, versus actually having a marketing strategy that I'm developing on the ground with people on the ground. Now, quite frankly, there is no right or wrong answer, but it is important to understand what choices you have in order to build and develop an appropriate strategy for you and your business. Every company will have a different strategy depending on your comfort level, depending on how much you want to invest, depending on who you want to partner with, etc. And by all means, I honestly say this, by all means, you have the ability to start your marketing strategy from home. And obviously, this decreases cost, it gives you more flexibility, it's happening in your own home office, so you can actually control it a little bit better. It gives you an idea how all that works. But I will say this, what you might want to try out is outsourcing some of that marketing strategy to professionals that are either experts in your home jurisdiction on the Chinese market, or experts that are in China that are dealing with all types of marketing strategies for companies. Ultimately, what you need to create is both a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. So looking short-term, I usually emphasize as something between 1 to 3 years. Long-term strategy, you're looking really far ahead within the next 10 years. What do you want to achieve in the Chinese market? By having this vision of both a short and long-term strategy, it will guide you into the right strategy phases for your business, because you might want to start with phase 1 and then move on to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, etc., until maybe you're fully operational yourself in the Chinese market. Now, what you need to understand is basically the types of options that exist to determine the type of structure you want to develop based on your business activity and your commitment level. So this is what I wanted to show here, okay? These are all the options that you have, and there are 2 slides. This is the first slide, which is really looking at what you have the ability to do from your home jurisdiction. So the first is, you have a company in your home jurisdiction, you're doing it alone. And when I do a lot of my business trips, what I'm hearing people do is that they hire Chinese interns to help them to start them off. So you'll have the Chinese intern potentially open the WeChat account, start doing a bit of content development in Chinese. They might also start looking for distributor searches or agency searches. They might do some of that preliminary groundwork in your home office back home. Now, for me, the only issue with interns is, well, they don't have so much hands-on experience, right? They're still students. So you will have to guide them and give them what they have to do. It's not going to come from them free willing, because they don't have the experience to know what they should be doing. So it is going to be a very slow start, all right? The next is using a distributor locally in China that handles also your marketing and sales needs. Now, how this happens usually is you might go to Shanghai, Beijing, or wherever and visit trade shows that are specific to your product category or service category, and you might meet a variety of distributors where they will handle everything for you, from shipment, logistics, warehousing, to client development, to then marketing and sales as well. My only tip here would be, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So don't always work with one distributor. Don't give them always the freedom and liberty to do everything. There has to be some level of control that you maintain. Because I can tell you now, when business is successful, at some point you will want to take control. Okay, and the question is, how do you then take that control? The other side, if you've never been selling in China before, using a distributor might be a little bit, you might be taking 2 steps forward versus, taking things a bit more slowly. So if you have never distributed to the Chinese market and you just want to start marketing your brand, marketing your products, maybe doing a bit of product testing locally to kind of do a bit of research as to whether there will be potential for your products or services, then you might want to just outsource to a marketing and branding agency to handle your market and sales needs. So, it's a matter of building your brand, and the agencies will then build the content in Chinese, potentially also then handle and create all the various marketing tools you would need. They would also be able to guide you as to what social platforms or digital platforms you should be on in terms of promoting content. they will probably also guide you as whether you should do any offline activity in order to build your brand, build your product, so that eventually you do get orders and sales inquiries for your goods. Another option thereafter is hiring an individual from your home jurisdiction that will be placed on the ground in China. And the point of this individual is to potentially do all of your research. So everything from market segmentation, product testing, advertising testing, brand awareness, price benchmarking, competitor benchmarking, they are there to basically test the market. And they might even then interview marketing and branding agencies. They might then also interview distributors. They will do all of that groundwork on your behalf, but you have hired them and they are loyal to you. And the advantage of this is that you have somebody that you could potentially call on a daily basis to know what is the update. And they will also be able to travel to you to give you updates on what is the progress for the Chinese market. Now, just to give you an idea, this service was offered by our firm to a client in the past, who after a period of 18 months realized that there was no potential for their products in China. They had too little sales inquiries, and so they exited. So, you know, it's not just that you use this individual and you find prosperity. It could also be that you use this individual and find that there is absolutely no potential for your product on the ground. Okay, it could go either way, but at least you are getting hands-on information to that fact. The last option is hiring an individual via a local agent to be placed on the ground in China. So that generally means hiring a mainland Chinese individual versus foreign individual to do all of that research and obtain all of that information on your behalf. Now, I have also some clients that are very gung-ho, and I had met one from Europe who actually was so optimistic about the market that even before doing their first visit to China, they had already a container of products, a 40-foot container of products on a boat on the way, without anyone being a consignee for the goods and without anyone actually placing an order for the goods. So you'll have people who, you know, are really, they have a vision for their company and they're going to go straight for it. But if you do want to go straight forward and you are ready to have your own structure, so like I said, it's all about phases. Now, alone on this page, you could have 2 to 3 different phases that you want to implement. Phase 1, doing it from your home office and doing the research yourselves. Second phase, either using a distributor or a marketing and branding agency, or that alone could be 2 phases, or hiring an individual on the ground yourself. So, you know, you have to think about things in phases. And probably the last phase for you would be actually implementing something on the ground so that you have absolute control over your business. And I'm going to be talking a lot about control throughout today's presentation. Control over the tools that you apply for, control, you know, and ownership of those tools, which is something you have to really think about. So these are the types of entities you can set up in China. The most common one, especially if you're trading in goods, would be a FICE, a foreign invested commercial enterprise, which allows you to import, export, and do domestic sales. A wholly foreign-owned enterprise is usually for service-oriented businesses. Now, you also have options to set up joint ventures. You also have the option, and I've listed it here, although I'm not very happy to do that, is that, you know, if you have hired, like as mentioned on the previous slide, a local agent, a mainland Chinese, you could also use that mainland Chinese person to set up their own business and then use that to trade. So that's why I've added domestically owned enterprises. It's not an avenue I recommend because, again, control and ownership is not with you. But it is a starting point if people are suddenly in a rush. And trust me, a lot of people have done that in the past. So these are the types of phases, I guess, that you could create in your China journey, which is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, maybe even phase 4, which can be something If you look at your vision plan, it might be a period of over 10 years where you create these steps in phases. The only thing you need to think about when creating these steps or these phases is how much liability do you have and how much liability do you want to take on? How much flexibility do you have specifically to win bids and deals and inquiries? And the third is how much marketability do you have? In China, image is something that is very key. Consumers, and I'm talking about consumers, but also companies, will actually do, I don't want to say background checks because it's not official background checks, but they will do some due diligence on your company, either checking your website or looking at the back end of the tools that I will highlight today in order to see if you are the actual owner or you're using an intermediary to do it. This does have an impact a lot on people, on consumers particularly, as to the value of the brand and what's happening. So don't underestimate these 3 points, which are liability, flexibility, and marketability. Now, I've just given a bit of a conclusion here. It's not a specific conclusion that everyone should take on, but it's just to give you a bit of a guideline, because again, going through these phases sometimes gives people a bit of an anxiety. So my simple conclusion, do it from home or do it from China, is the following. Do it in China if you want to generate revenue. If you want to generate revenue yourself and you don't want to do it through an intermediary and you want to trade locally, meaning buy or sell locally, then you need to have a business license that allows you to do that. And that means committing yourself to the market and setting up a limited liability company, as I mentioned earlier, a FICE, in order to be able to generate revenue and have the control over that. If generating the revenue is not a requirement at the moment, then do it from home would be if you're looking to test the market, research the market, and then do some test transactions through distributors who then generate the revenue on your behalf. Then, do it from home, which means you don't need an entity in China. It means that you will probably have to give control or some control to third parties and individuals. So that's my simple conclusion. It really is very case specific. So if you want to go into more detail specifically about your own business, then do let me know. So let's start looking at some of the tools that you may need in order to be able to market in China. And how do you get them, right? So the big question is, how can you get them? So the first big tool is WeChat. And the next slide for me, because the majority of people on my who actually physically attend my webinars are from the UK, I took this from some research that I just did, and I think it really, really highlights very, very well kind of the importance of WeChat in China. So if you look on the left side, in the UK, if you take your iPhone or your Android, you will probably have all of these apps on your phone. Things for your social life, for transfers, taxis, transportation, credit cards, booking trips, finance, networking, chatting, shopping, charities, making appointments, utilities. You'll probably have all of these types of apps on your iPhone. Now, if you look on the right, in China, you just need one app, which is WeChat. And that kind of shows you how important WeChat is in China. So I'm not going to talk now from a corporate perspective. I'm talking now as an individual. If you are doing business in China and you're trying to garner Chinese clients, or you're trying to work with Chinese businesses, you should set up as an individual a WeChat account. Business cards that used to be culturally such a value in China pretty much no longer exists. Very rarely do people want a business card. What they want is to connect with you on WeChat. So you should do your best to definitely try and set up an individual WeChat account so that you can communicate with people much easier in China. So how do we set up WeChat, official WeChat accounts? And by official WeChat accounts, I am referring to corporate WeChat accounts. okay? Which is really the official branding and marketing tool where you're going to be creating content or highlighting events or, you know, doing advertising testing or whatever. What I'm looking at is the administrative side of developing, of creating that tool, okay? So to set up WeChat, you have three options. One, you can set up an official WeChat account through your overseas company via a third party, or if you incorporate your own entity and you have your own Chinese company in China, okay? But as you can see here, it's usually an entity that has to own this official WeChat corporate account. And one of the documents you do need to provide is the business license of the entity that's owning it. So if you want to open a WeChat account through your overseas company, it is a special application. It is not always guaranteed, but what I do want to say is that all applications from all foreign companies globally can be accepted. Approval is another thing because it is a case-by-case application. This changed in mid-2018 where I believe only 10 or 12 companies in certain countries could do the application. Now it's open to everyone. Again, case by case, it takes about 2 to 3 months. Costs are pretty minimal, quite frankly, to open the account, considering the leverage you might get out of it. But the advantage is, if you're not ready to commit fully to the Chinese market, then you have complete ownership over this WeChat official account, all right? That's the advantage of it. Now, opening an official WeChat account via a third party is probably what most companies do when they are not looking to make the full commitment to the Chinese market and they want to do things from their home jurisdiction. So the biggest question would be then, who is this third party? Well, most likely it would be the marketing and branding agency who sets up the WeChat account for you and then does the physical marketing, content building, and branding through that account. Now, the advantage of doing it through your marketing and branding agency is the fact that they are contractually obliged to give you back that account once you've set up your own entity, okay? And what you can do is then transfer the followers to the new account once that's set up. But it is a good way to get started fast. And the only downside to this is that the ownership belongs to the third party. In the back end, which people can look at, individuals can look at the back end, they will see that probably the creator of the account is not you, it is the third party. So that will imply that you are not physically on the ground in China, so they may not like that regarding your brand. And the other is that potentially you will not be able to run WeChat advertising, but you will be able to publish content, okay? But you can obviously promote in other ways, etc. But this would be something that your marketing and branding agency would guide you on, okay? The other is obviously the third option, and you know, the one which probably gives you the most control is if you actually set up a company in China and that company then owns the WeChat official account. And it's pretty simple and cheap to do and just takes about 1 to 2 weeks. So again, think about things in phases. Think about who should own the tool. You should think about who is going to help you to create the content, who's going to create that absolute marketing strategy, that content marketing strategy for you. Okay, you're going to be doing it in-house or you're going to be outsourcing it to an expert who will handle it. So this is something you have to really think about. The next tool that I want to talk about is websites. Now, obviously, if you are based in the Western world, you will most likely have a .net, .org, .com website, .uk website, .us, .fr, etc. You'll probably have your home website, right? Now, the advantage of having a Chinese domain name is that it is a distinct online identifier representing, the value and orientation of your company, basically. It means if you have a .cn website that you are committed to the Chinese market, and it shows that, right? Especially if the website is in Chinese. Now, the key with the .cn domain names is that there are certain things you have to know about, okay? So what are the requirements for registering a Chinese domain name? Now, as you all know, in China, there is the Great Firewall, which basically means that the Chinese government, or very specifically, the China Internet Network Information Center, as well as the Ministry of Information Industry, they are controlling the content that goes online in China. Okay, so what you have to be very much aware of is the type of content you're going to post, how you're going to post it. If you look at Chinese websites versus Western websites, there are great distances. Again, I'm not a marketing professional. You should really be talking to a marketing company that can help you with developing the right and appropriate website for your business. But these two government organizations control content, they control ownership of the domain name. They are the individuals that are actually responsible for it. Now, in order to set up a .cn domain name, not difficult. So this is because this is the only service provider I know. But you can go onto GoDaddy, type into Google GoDaddy China. You will find their website, and in that box where I've written Woodburn Global, you can actually put in your domain that you're using now to see if it's available. So that might be even a first step for you. And if it is available, you have the opportunity to purchase it. Okay, so there are plenty of registrars. So GoDaddy is a registrar out there that can help you to set up your domain names. You could do it today. There are 60 registrars. GoDaddy is just one of 60, okay, where you can apply to do your .cn domain names. It is quite a straightforward procedure. You just have to, obviously the website is in Chinese. If you use Google Translate, you might be able to translate the page to go from, one page to the next page, or one step to the next step. Or again, you can use a marketing or branding agency to help you to set up your domain name. Okay. What you need to be aware of is, one, you can purchase a Chinese domain name with a company located outside of China. You can purchase it with a company located in China. You can also purchase it as an individual that's not located in China. But the first step that you have to do is see whether your domain is available, okay, and the right domain is available. Now, a big question that I get asked is, should we use our English name or should we use a Chinese name? So, for example, for Woodburn, well, I'm only interested to market myself to foreign investors. My target market are not Chinese individuals or Chinese local domestic companies. That's not who I'm targeting. So for me, the key would be having woodburnglobal.com, because I want people from overseas to gain access to my website. For you, if you're trying to garner the Chinese consumers to go to your website, first of all, you probably want a .cn domain name, and you might want to have a Chinese brand name, okay? Unless there is so much history and significance in your English name, and people are probably aware of your brand already, that you just want to use your English name. So again, big decision to make, right? Do we use our English brand? Or do we use a Chinese brand? And in yesterday's presentation, I was talking about trademarking your brand and the importance behind that. It is also important to save your brand when we're talking about .cn domain names. So similar to trademark registrations, you want to register your .cn domain name if it is something that you are going to utilize to do it ASAP, i.e., immediately in 25 minutes when this webinar session is over, because it is a first to file principle, okay? So the first person who registers it, they are the one who owns it. If you want to buy it from them, then it's a bidding war, okay? I believe a long time ago, Nike had a bidding war in relation to their .cn domain name. So be aware of that, keep that in mind, the importance of whether you want a .cn domain name or not. Now, scammers. We all know there are domain name scammers out there. Generally, these are the emails that I get because for us, our importance is to have .com. We don't have a .cn domain name. It's not something that we're keen on. And I get probably once a month an email like this saying, we have received an inquiry from somebody who wants to register your .cn domain name. If this is something that we realized that there are companies out there that use that. If this is something you want to register, please let us know and we will hold it for you. It's basically these internet domain services companies, or even maybe individuals that are kind of trying to gain business because they want to earn the registration dollars for registering a domain. But again, you know, it's a sign. If someone is interested in registering to your domain, this is a warning letter basically. If you don't have a .cn, do it and think about whether you need it or not, okay? So what is the strategy behind a brand name? I talked yesterday about what should be your strategy for your trademark. For your domain name, very simply, go to GoDaddy China, type in your brand and see if it's available. That's step number one. If it is available, think very clearly about whether you want to register it, okay? If the domain is taken, then there are 3 things you can do. 1, let the domain name go and create a new brand. Buy it. Number 2 is buy it from the company that took it from you or the individual that took it from you. And 3, ultimately, if things don't pan out in the right way, you may have to pursue legal action if you really want to take that domain from them. But remember, preemption by registration is your best and least expensive form of protection. Yesterday, as I was trying to grab the GoDaddy website, I was typing in Woodburn Global and I was just checking and it's still available. But the cost was like $27 to buy it. It's peanuts, all right? I mean, this is something that is so easy to do. It's online. You can do it, okay? But you just need to know if you need it or not, if you're going to use it for marketing purposes or not. Now, when it comes to your website, so, you know, now we've talked about the tool of the domain name. Now we have to talk about the tool, which is your website, okay? So the biggest point about your website and building your website, and the biggest question that's out there is, where should the website be hosted? Should the website be hosted on a server that is in China, or should it be hosted on a website that is outside of China? Again, no right or wrong. Depends, I guess, on the budget that you have and how much you want to spend on that, okay? So what are the pros and cons of a website that is hosted outside of China? Well, a website that's hosted and operated from outside of China requires no specific licenses to become live. However, so that's one advantage. However, if it is hosted outside, then the first thing you have to be aware of is slowness and dormancy. So it will be very difficult for people to potentially find it on search engines and also then open the site and utilize the site. The second issue is the Great Firewall, which if you don't have any, you know, ridiculous content on there, you're not, you know, there's not going to be an issue with the firewall. But you know, if you do have content on there, or if you do, you know, have people that scam you and get online onto your website and then change the data, that's where potentially you might get blocked by the firewall and ultimately get blacklisted. So, you know, the pro is no additional licenses needed. The con is, you know, people actually ultimately may not be able to reach the content that is on your site. Now, obviously, if you have a website that's inside of China, that's hosted on a server inside of China, Amazon has servers. I don't know if Google has servers anymore, to be honest with you, because Google came back into the market. But there are companies out there that have warehouses of servers where you can host your website, and they offer just that as a service. So you can do it. I'm not familiar with the costs associated with it, but I'm pretty sure your marketing and branding agency will be able to guide you on that information. But obviously, you can imagine if you have your website hosted inside China, it's going to be faster, it's going to be more stable, it's going to be more effective on Chinese search engines like Bing. The disadvantage to a website that is hosted within China is you do need to understand the licensing regime and who is then going to own the licenses associated with that website. So what I want to offer here, well, I'm gonna do this case study after I've explained the types of licenses. So there are 2 licenses that you can obtain for your website. You must obtain for your website to become operational. The first is an ICP license and the other is an ICP filing, okay? The difference between the two is that an ICP filing means that you are not physically selling anything via your website. So it is not a commercial website, it is a non-commercial website. It is basically a showroom of your products so people get to know about it, and there's information there about events or where shops are, etc. It's kind of like your online showroom, right? The other is an ICP license. So an ICP license means that you are physically selling goods through your website. So you can imagine all of the e-commerce platforms, they have ICP licenses. All the high-end fashion brands that have their own Chinese websites, they have the ICP license as well, okay? The licenses are not easy to obtain. So basically, if you want to obtain any of these the ICP license or do the ICP filing, you need to have a registered Chinese company with a Chinese business license. The company in point 1 needs to usually own the Chinese domain name. There has to be sufficient registered capital, professional staff. There has to be an IT infrastructure. So allow me to give you a bit of a case study here. There was a client of mine in the past who is a very well-known e-commerce platform. In their category of products, they are ranked number 2 in China. It is a US headquartered company. And how they entered the market was that they had an employee in California who had a relative based in Shanghai register the domain name. This relative had also their own company and obtained the ICP license for their Chinese website. This worked brilliantly for the first few years until the company realized that they wanted to set up their own entity in China to manage and operate the back end of the website, meaning they wanted to have their own IT staff on the ground. They wanted to have a good logistics team on the ground. They wanted to have more supply chain individuals on the ground. They basically just wanted to create a type of back-end office, but as they were setting up their own company, they also wanted to take over the control of the domain name as well as the website. Now, I guess everybody is understanding that this story is not going to go well. It didn't go well. There was a lot of negotiation that went back and forth. There was also a bit of embarrassment by the employee in California because this was a relative. Eventually lawyers were required, and there was quite, a bit of pretty high purchase price to obtain everything back. But eventually they did get it all back. So this is something that you just have to keep in mind about ownership and control, okay? My theory is if you're going to use professional service companies, like marketing and branding agencies, you know, this is their core business. I don't think they will do anything in order to harm your business, and it will be contractually like that as well. So if they did do something, you know, you would have a contract on hand that you could go to the courts to sue. If you use distributors or if you utilize individuals, this is where it gets to be difficult. So with distributors, again, if you have contracts in place, you are protected because you can always go to the courts. But I know a lot of companies out there that don't have contracts with their distributors. They don't have master agreements outlining all of these different points. Or, you know, if these are distributors they've used for B2B business and not for consumers, and they've used them for 10 years, they never update their master agreements based on the new business models that have to be created. So it's a matter of making sure contractually everything is in there that's needed to protect yourself. And obviously with individuals, most of the time there's only emails that go back and forth. That's not a contract. So you need to keep that in mind and understand, you know, who has control, who has ownership, and remember who has that on hand. Now, I'm going to kind of go into the end of today's presentation looking at e-commerce because, you know, we've looked at the two main tools that people need to start off their marketing strategies in China. One is WeChat, and the other is having a website locally. Now, once you've started doing your marketing, you might start getting inquiries, or, you know, people saying, oh, you know, I would love to purchase your product, but I don't know where to find it. How do I find it? Are you on certain e-commerce platforms? Are you in, you know, retail stores? How can I buy it, right? So now traditionally people are going more in the directions of going more in the direction of e-commerce versus going the traditional route of retail, which is why I'm highlighting e-commerce a little bit more than usual. Now, what I want people to realize is that with certain e-commerce platforms, you are not required to have a legal entity in China, okay? And I wanted to use the example of Tmall. So on the left-hand side, you have an outline and the criteria for Tmall.com. And on the right-hand side, you have the criteria for Tmall Global, which a lot of people don't know about, unfortunately. Tmall.com requires you to have a legal entity in China if you want to work with them. It requires you to have a local bank account to work with them, etc. With Tmall Global, because they are based out of Hong Kong, you are not required to have a local entity in China to work with them. You can use your home office to sign a contract with them, and you can do all of that work directly with them. It's like a testing platform to see whether it's successful or not for you then to go into the next phase, which is actually doing something properly in China. Now, Tmall Global is just one example. You also have JD.com, which has also a global portion, and there are a couple of other of the larger e-commerce platforms that have that as well. So I do want you to be aware of it. In addition to that, on Thursday, I will be talking about cross-border e-commerce, which is also an avenue for you to not create an entity in China as well initially. So I'll be touching on that. So if that interests you, do join me on Thursday as well. So I wanted to highlight this because it goes back to the initial 2 slides of today's presentation, looking at a structure that you can develop. Well, you don't have to you don't have to use e-commerce. In order to be able to do e-commerce in China, you don't have to have an entity in China. There are other solutions out there that can help you so that you do the business from China. Now, I have had clients or companies that I've spoken to that have gone with Tmall Global, as well as JD Global, etc. And what they told me was, oh, you know, it was a waste of time. Nothing came into fruition. Sales was so minimal. We've decided to actually just go in full blast and set up our so that we can work with Tmall.com. And when I start asking questions like, well, in conjunction of being on Tmall Global, have you also done marketing and branding initiatives? And the answer was always dumbfounded, like, no, we haven't. Well, there's no point on going on Tmall Global if you don't have a local Chinese website and you're not on WeChat developing content to do a bit of public relations and marketing and branding about your products and services, and then informing people where you can be found, which is Tmall Global, okay? Those two things have to come hand in hand, okay? Without the marketing, nobody's gonna know you're on Tmall Global, okay? You have to do the marketing and build a strong marketing strategy so that you build brand awareness locally in the market. If you don't do that, well, quite frankly, what's the point of it? So I wanted to use this as an example, first of all, to say there are options for you to not set up an entity in China and go on those local e-commerce platforms. You can do that from home. But two, don't expect to go on the e-commerce platforms and not do any marketing. Okay, the two have to go hand in hand. There are so many e-commerce channels. Okay, I want people to be aware of that. The media highlights a lot about Tmall, Taobao, JD. Oh my God, the list goes on. Quite frankly, Dundang. But I want you to also be aware that there are specific platforms for specific product categories. So you might have specific e-commerce platforms that are only for cosmetics, only for baby products, only for food and beverage. So instead of going automatically to Tmall, Taobao, JD, where the commission rates are pretty high, quite frankly, because everyone wants to go there, maybe have the help from your marketing and branding agency to target a little bit better the right platform for you. All right. Now, again, I want to emphasize a little bit on e-commerce laws. So in January 1st, 2019, there were new e-commerce laws that came into fruition and implementation. And I just want to emphasize here that things are so much better. And what I mean by that is that not all liability falls on the suppliers. Liability also befalls the operators of the platforms. And there is much more protection for consumers, which is a good thing, okay? So I'm very happy with the new laws that came out, especially those that came out in relation to the consumers. To go into a little bit detail about the laws, so now obviously one of the trends, well, now there's a law specifically associated with the non-traditional shopping channels like WeChat and Douyin. So for example, you can actually through those what I would have called more communication networks, you can also sell, and now they have laws that protect both suppliers, laws for the platform operators, and then for the consumers as well in that regard. There are also a lot of IP protection in the new laws, and it relates also to yesterday's conversation. But you know, if someone is selling your product and using your trademark on any of these platforms and you file a lawsuit against them, the platforms are responsible actually to do a background check to make sure that there are none of these IP squatters or IP hijackers that are taking your trademark and selling inferior products. So the laws have become much more strict on these platforms in relation to that type of business. So the platforms are required to do their own due diligence on the companies that want to create the online stores within these platforms and see what kind of trademarks they're utilizing and also what they're selling. So I don't know if you saw it, but let me just go back. On Tmall.com, in order to be able to register with them, you have to have a trademark registered in China, and they do want to see your trademark license certificate. Okay, so they are doing, they are doing their due diligence on that, or they're required now with the new laws to do their due diligence on that. There are regulations on unfair competition amongst operators. So, you know, everyone was going with the big names and the little ones were kind of being not known about. So there are now regulations on unfair competition amongst the operators. As I mentioned earlier, there's shared liability between the platforms, for the platforms, between the platforms, etc. And consumer rights are also protected and enforced. Now, one of the things I think that I should highlight here is that obviously there's a lot of, in terms of consumers, so there are definitely some consumers out there that are not good or not good people, or you also have marketing and branding agencies that do very naughty business, which is create fake reviews on competitor sites. So there are also laws now to ban fake reviews or do due diligences on any reviews that come in site. Also, if there are fake positive reviews, because then people, you know, get higher ranked in the platforms, people, you know, the platforms are responsible for checking all of that. So I wanted to end today's presentation to kind of reflect a little bit on what I mentioned earlier about the China roadmap that we have devised for companies that are looking to grasp opportunities in China or have already received opportunities in China and want to implement compliant, safe structures and then also then grow their business exponentially. Each company that I have ever met has had their own unique experience. They've had their own strategies, their own milestone, their own phases. They've had each their own individual obstacles and bumps in the road. Not everyone has the same story. So this is the China roadmap that we've created. Basically looks at 3 different milestones. One is that it looks at investigating the opportunity, which can only occur by educating yourself, doing the right research, meaning doing proper research like market segmentation, price comparisons, competitor benchmarking, brand awareness, product testing, advertising testing. I mean, all of these things that are very specific, not looking at just general overview market research studies, right? And then once that education and research is fulfilled, it makes it so much easier to create a viable strategy and budget for whatever you want to implement, okay? Whether that is doing the business, whether that strategy says you're going to do the business from home, or whether that strategy says you're going to implement something in China, or whether that strategy says we're going to be working with third parties in China, okay? Strategy can be different from everyone. The next step is the implementation of that strategy. So one thing I can't highlight more is developing an ecosystem of people in China that can guide and help you. I think one of the beautiful things about China is that as a Westerner, all Westerners want to share their war stories. We all love to do it because now we can laugh about it. At the time, you definitely can't laugh about it, but everyone wants to share what horrible experience they've gone through, and you should take that to your advantage, okay? You should utilize that to improve your strategy and know what you should not be doing. But when I say develop your ecosystem, it's all about meeting people. It's all about networking. That's what China is about. That's what's beautiful about it. To do it, you need WeChat though. So keep that in mind. But you need to meet with distributors. You need to meet with suppliers. You should meet with chambers of commerce. You should meet with lawyers, accountants, HR professionals, advertisers, PR professionals, marketing and branding agencies. Oh, and the list goes on. I mean, you should really build an ecosystem of individuals that can help and guide you. Then you have to protect yourself. I mean, the goal is obviously protect your brand, protect your company. And it's not just about protecting your IP or protecting your domain name or having ownership of a variety of different tools that you're going to use to go into the market. It's also about protecting yourself to develop the right systems and processes, which leads to the next item, developing systems and processes. So I meet a lot of companies that have transacted with China, but never received advice on those transactions. and they've lost money out of it that they didn't know actually at the time that they lost, but when they start talking to people, they realize they've been cheated on a little bit. So I give a very simple example here. If you are transacting from, let's say, the UK with a Chinese company in China, know that there are taxes involved, and you can have your Chinese provider pay those taxes versus you, okay? So when you're developing any form of system or process in China, whether it's just a simple overseas transaction, whether it is a trade transaction, service transaction, implementing a company and creating operational guidelines, you should create all of those things to protect your business, okay? It comes kind of hand in hand. The growth step is really at looking at the numbers, or better yet, making sure numbers are being produced, meaning, financial numbers, making sure you can read them, okay, and understand them, so that it allows you to focus on the growth of your business and the direction you want to take your business in. So for me, this is the China roadmap, where you have the newbies under the opportunity, the startups with the implementation steps, and growth is reflecting those people that are the old China hands and have been doing business for 5, 10, 15 years. There's always room for improvement. So that's a little bit, what is the China roadmap we've developed, and we utilize now to help companies understand what should the flow be and the phases kind of be when looking at things. So, what are the next steps when going into the Chinese market? The next steps really would be educate and research, build a network of individuals that have China experience, create a strategy of phases, both short and long term, create a budget, know how much you can spend. I have this rule of following a rule of simplicity. Things can get very complex in China very quickly, and what you want to have is a strategy that is simple, that gives you what you need, isn't complex, and then allows you the freedom to be able to obtain any opportunities. The only thing I want to mention about opportunities is the fact that you should evaluate those opportunities very carefully, which you can only do if you're educated and you've done the research, but definitely do an ROI on opportunities to see if they really are worthwhile. Something I learned very quickly on in China: knowledge is power. The more you know, the more leverage you will have in negotiations with anybody in China. And last but not least, definitely watch your investment when you're going into that market. So how can I help you create your marketing business model? Well, the first thing that I'm happy to do is advise you and educate you on what would probably suit your business, your products, your commitment level, and your capability with investment resources. So, if you're at the very early stages, please don't hesitate to contact me. We can set up a strategy session to talk through what you might need to do. The next point is I can help, or we can help with the implementation of your business model, whether it's something that's on or something that you're trying to construct from overseas and you need assistance with contractual information, taxes, these types of things. The next thing is you want to do protection implementation. So that means protecting your IP, understanding the ownership of the various tools you will need, how you're going to own those things. What people forget is, you can always use your advisor as a sounding board. Even if we don't physically provide a service, we are there to tell you this is a good idea because, or this is a bad idea because. We can give you the pros and cons. We can definitely help you with system processes, contract formulation, and any ongoing control that you might need over your business model. So this is kind of how we can help companies to develop their marketing strategies. If you are interested in booking a session with me, don't hesitate to do so. Next week is Chinese New Year though, so I am still working, so I can take a couple of calls here and there, but reach out and I'm happy to talk with you. In the chat section, I put the link but you will also get a copy of this presentation as well. So you can do it at a later stage. Now we've just run over time, so we're at 65 minutes already. Let me just look at the questions that have come in. So one of the questions I find is quite interesting. So there's an individual online that's he says he's done a lot of research online himself about how to create his business model, what he needs to know, but what he's finding very frustrating is, and very confusing, is that there is a lot of differing information online. So he's asking, what should I rely on? Obviously, if you are doing things from home right now and either you are doing research yourself or you have an intern who's doing the research on your behalf, first of all, try and only look at information that has been published from 2019 onwards. The reason why I say that is because the biggest new law that has come out, which is the Foreign Investment Law, was just implemented Jan 1, 2020. So don't read information that is definitely prior to 2018. So 2019 onwards are articles and publications you should be reading about. If you're looking at creating your marketing strategy, or you're looking to create your just general business model on trade, distribution, e-commerce, etc., again, look at information that's been dated from 2019, because Ecommerce Laws, for example, only came out in Jan 1, 2019. You've all got to understand that in terms of regulations, China can seem like a very new country. And when you go online to Google and you do research, you'll find information that's dated back all the way to 2003, 2004. So you've got to make sure that you're reading very much up-to-date information. I think on the other side is, it doesn't hurt to talk to people. If you are in a country that has a China-associated Chamber of Commerce, utilize them. They can give you a lot of free information as well. Otherwise, talk to business advisors. Usually the first consultation or even the first 2 consultations are free of charge. So you can have a 30-minute to 1-hour call with them and obtain advice that you might need in order to know how to move forward. Don't forget also to build your network. So research also companies that can, start building your ecosystem already in the opportunity phase, because that helps you to get information from a variety of different people. I gave a whole list earlier on, PR agencies, marketing brands, etc. You can talk to so many different people about it, and usually the first call or first 2 calls are always free of charge. Last but not least, what else can I say? Travel to China. I think that is probably something that you shouldn't underestimate. If you haven't traveled to China yet and you see an opportunity there, go there first and see, for yourself. Go with your feet on the ground, smell the air, and see what China can offer you. I'm going to leave it there because we've almost hit 70 minutes, and I hate to go over time. But for those of you that have asked questions, so Laura, your question just popped up, and then there's also Mary and Sam and Matt. I'm going to answer those questions to you directly. I'll answer them before the end of today. So please just be patient. I will get to those, but I hate running over time, and I apologize for that. But as mentioned, if you want to book a strategy session, please do reach out to me, and I'd be happy to have a 30-minute, 1-hour call with you to talk about what you're looking to do. Again, we've got 2 more webinars this week. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about creating a distribution business model and what you need to know about working with distributors in China. And on Thursday, we will be talking about e-commerce business models and what options you have there. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. So again, if you haven't subscribed to those 2, you can do so on our webpage on the events section. And last but not least, the webinar is being recorded, and you will also obtain a copy of the presentation as well. I want to thank everyone for joining. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you and goodbye.